All right, what's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. This is Table Full of Knives, the Ridge Runner Blades podcast, and today we are joined by a super special guest, knife guy extraordinaire, international bushcraft sensation, Joe Flowers. What's up, man?
I don't know about sensation or anything like that, Taylor. Hey, we're in Ferguson, North Carolina.
We are at the beautiful Blue Ridge Ranch in Ferguson in the mountains. Thank you guys so much for letting us film here.
Yeah.
We got a lot of stuff coming up today with Joe and all these awesome Condor knives.
I'm pretty excited because just the location alone is just an amazing place to have a podcast set.
Yeah.
So
if you guys can see in the background, it's an awesome spot.
We have beautiful Appalachian foothills all around us here at the Blue Ridge Ranch. Pretty cool.
All right, so who is Joe Flowers, man? Tell us a little bit about you. I know not everybody's gonna know who you are, so spill it.
Lucky them. So I'm Joe Flowers. I design for quite a few different knife companies, most notably Condor Knives out of El Salvador. Condor Knives is owned by Imacasa. They're a machete manufacturer, Taylor. They make like 40,000 machetes a month. So they do a really big job. I also work for Tops Knives out of the U.S., Work Tough Gear, Artisan, and also CGRB, and quite a few other companies coming up here in the future if I'm lucky.
It's a long list.
Yeah, I get to design knives a lot, so that's basically it.
How many have you designed, do you think?
How many or how long?
How many?
Oof. Probably well over 200. Knife designs, but it sounds like a really impressive number. But if you go and talk to some of these other knife companies, their in-house designers can really blow your mind. Like Polo, Leo Espinoza, for instance, of Tops Knives, he's probably up into the 500 mark. Oh yeah, he's quite a prolific designer where you don't really know about. So knife designing is very interesting, but it's also, you're taking a sharp thing and then you're putting a holdy thing on it. And it seems like it's really hard, but it's also really easy, but it's also different to try and, get out of the box, cut your way out of the box.
It's got to make sense. Right?
Yeah. Well, in some cases, yeah.
So how did you get into knife designing? What's the beginning of that?
Oh, Taylor, that's a really good question. You remember Tactical Knives magazine back in the day? You've been in the knives all your life too, and I really like to go into like Barnes and Noble and stuff and looking at the magazines, and finally I got a subscription to Tactical Knives magazine. The editor, his name was Stephen Dick, Stephen Dick, but Tactical Knives magazine is no more, as is a lot of print magazines, and well, long story short, on the forums, like knife forums and blade forums back in the day, I started going out into the bush here in North Carolina and doing stuff with the knives, and people, enjoyed the posts. And so Terrell Hoffman, a knife photographer, introduced me to Stephen Dick. And then long story short, I could write, 2 words and put them into a sentence. So that was enough for him, and started to write about knives. So reviewing and just being a fan of knives has always been like a passion of mine. I'm a zoology major, entomology minor. I also concentrate in herpetology. That's a study of reptiles and amphibians. And I've always loved being outdoors for creepy crawlies and doing all that, but also having a big knife on me, and trying to use that while I'm out in the outdoors. So that kind of had its part in knife writing. And that's kind of where I started, was just writing about knives and doing reviews. So I wrote for a bunch of different magazines: Tactical Knives magazine, Self-Reliance Illustrated, Survival Quarterly, Backpacker magazine. That's a big deal to me, at least. And started writing about knives. And then eventually I was at a blade show, kind of like where we were at just a few weeks ago, and walked up to Condor Tool and Knife. Terrell Hoffman, same gentleman, introduced me to Condor. They were just getting started, I believe, like in 2008. And I've always been a machete nut my entire life. So I walked up and was like, well, what are you guys doing? You guys should stick to what you know. And they're like, oh, okay, tell us more. you actually know who we are? And I'm like, yeah, because I'm a huge machete dork. And I gave them some designs, and like a 300% sale increase later or something like that. They started listening a lot more, and it kind of started there. And at the same time, right around that same time, I started designing for Tops Knives as well, with the Shango. So that's kind of like how I started getting into knife designing.
So
more
Condor
or less.
was the first one?
Yeah, Condor and Tops were both
Tops.
the first companies I designed for. And I had done a lot of collaborations with other knife makers. Andy Roy from Fiddleback Forge, Off the Map Custom Knives, and Dogwood, our good friend Dan, all did the pterosaur, which is one of the ones we have laid out here on the table, a custom version back in 2009. And that was honestly one of my first good knife designs, if we're gonna rate our knife designs and stuff. But it was always there in the back of my head of, oh, okay, maybe I could do this as a living, and that's kind of how it got started.
So the pterosaur is one of my favorite Condor designs. What are your top 3 you've done that you with Condor that you've done for you?
Well, I would say probably the top 3, definitely the pterosaur. So Taylor, back in the day, they were like, Joe, we're ready to do a injection molded sheath, and we want a good design that would really fit the bill as being like a lightweight, bushcraft knife. And I was like, gosh, I really have a bunch of ideas, but I'm going to try something tried and true. And so I pulled the pterosaur from, actually it was Dan Eastland's version of the pterosaur out, and they were like, we love it. Let's go ahead and do that. We're going to do our version in 1095. And when I presented them, the pterosaur, I presented it with like 17 to 20 different blades that all fit in the same polypropylene sheath. So, in tooling, when you're doing high impact polypropylene or any sort of injected molded stuff, it takes a lot of money. So I had to try and convince them, hey, we can do a whole bunch of different designs with this. And so the pterosaur is something I'm really proud of. I've got like $300 knives out there, and I still grab my $40 pterosaur all the time.
Is that what these retail for, is $40?
Yeah, $40 or $50 for the normal pterosaur. That's in 1095 with the 4-inch blade and the 4-inch handle, high impact polypropylene.
And then the new one here.
Yeah, that's a little bit more expensive because it's made out of space stuff. 14C 20N stainless steel. That's called the Lapotes. All it is a pterosaur, but in 14C 28N. Taylor, it's hard to name knives, so I wanted to do something that was completely different from the word pterosaur. And turns out in China there's this here's a zoology major coming in. Turns out there's a extinct or about to be extinct species of dolphin, and its species name is Lapotes. So one of the ways I thought, okay, this thing is, it likes to go in water, it's really cool. So we named it after the Lapotes. It has a really complicated name in Japanese that it's not, or Chinese, Mandarin, that's not easy to spell. So we said Lapotes. It's easy for people in South America to say, all the way up to the U.S. too.
So is this one out yet?
Yes,
Available to buy?
it just came out. I believe you guys might be getting some in stock pretty soon here.
Yeah.
The first version is in blue. Guys, if you don't like the blue handle, don't worry. There'll be some other colors later. Like the pterosaur, we got it in coyote. We have it in black. We have green. We have a whole slew of different colors that are out here. And oddly enough, in my Jeep back there, not on the table, there's another version of the pterosaur called the Trog, and it's kind of got like this flint look to it. It kind of looks like it was hand napped like a arrowhead, and that's made out of 1095, and that's just a different take on the pterosaur too. When you design, Taylor, it's really cool to you can only do so much with the knife. You're putting a handle and a cutting tool. I mean, this is the whole reason we are where we're at today, is we were able to make tools. So to be a designer and think about different ways of taking, a cutting tool with a handle on it and incorporate, something new out of it. It's kind of difficult, but also extremely rewarding and fun too. And that's okay. Hey, we have, for instance, guys, we have the pterosaur. How do we change up the blade to be completely something different? And that's fascinating to me too. You know a lot about that because you change a lot of axe profiles to make something different out of something old, and that's super interesting to me.
So the first favorite for you, pterosaur. What number?
Definitely.
Two? What's number two?
Number two, maybe let's just say on the table, because this is kind of like asking which child is your favorite. And all knives matter, whether I've designed them or not. I love all knives, but right now it's a close. As I'm about to cut him, this happens all the time during interviews. It would be a close tie between the Terrachetti, just because I like how small and compact the package is. This is our first time doing injection molding on a sheath.
That's
so
a pretty awesome sheath for that.
Yeah, and a lot of machetes, just depending where you're at, this isn't the rule, guys, but a lot of machetes that you get from Central and South America have smaller handles because a good majority, not the rule, but a good majority of the population have smaller hands like I do. So they don't fit North Americans so much. So I made a lot larger handle to fit someone like your hand size, to where there's like about a 5-inch handle instead of 4 inches on there. And also what I like about this Terrachetti is the back handle right here. You can use that to kind of choke back on the edge and use it to be able to chop a little bit better. And that's one of the reasons why I like this particular design so much. Yeah, it does have a differential grind on it, a skin grind here, and like a more chopping edge up here. But you'll see that even in traditional kukris too. That's not necessarily the deal breaker, or the thing that I like the most about this is probably just the handle and the ergonomics on it.
I'm a fan of the handle myself. That like bird's head type grip at the end.
Yeah.
Oh, and you got a lot of control with that.
And the cool engineers at Condor made the head kind of look like a Loch Ness monster, like a monster. So if you hold it this way, it's like the throat scales going up to the head of like Godzilla or something like that. I thought that was really cool too. And that's why we made the head him look like rawr, we're angry, instead of just like a normal oval shape or something along that line.
All right, number 3. What are you going to pick on the table?
All right, on the table, number 3. Gosh, there's so many here. Makara all right, you know what? I'll grab a new one. So this is the Polar Wind machete. This is a longer version of the Polar North, and there are some things that you might not see here, like there's no choil on the thicker distal tapered one. We have a choil. On this one, it would be too wobbly. And even in this case, some people say that it's still too wobbly, but it doesn't seem that way for me. And I designed this based on my trips down in the Amazon jungle. I own a company called Bushcraft Global, where we do a lot of knife stuff out in the jungle down in Brazil, Peru, and Colombia. I talked to a lot of the indigenous down there and was like, hey, Alberto, what are some of the things you want to see in a machete? And like, oh man, your American machetes like hurt my arms. They're so thick. And honestly, he was right, because he has to use them all day long. So we did this one out of 2 millimeter thick 1075, and you can see the flex on it. It's a very, very thin, fast moving machete. To me, it's a more user friendly, I know the machetes in the world, style machete versus like some of the thicker things that you might see out here. So I really like that one.
This would be a American machete.
Yeah. So that one's more like a competition style chopper. Yeah, right.
Like a lot.
As Americans with our American axe heritage, and all the Europeans coming to the U.S. and seeing all these beautiful green things called trees, we didn't have chainsaws back in the day, so we had axes, and so we have this crazy chopping culture, especially with axes. You might know a little bit about axes.
Yeah, axes are a long road to go down, but this one is super cool. You don't really see etches on axes anymore, especially like a newer production type thing. You see a lot of this in like the top tier axes from from way back in the 30s.
Like a Black Raven.
Black Raven,
or that Lincoln or
the Lincoln. There's
King
a
Cutters.
lot out there. If you guys don't know about, look it up. It's kind of cool. But what is the name of this one? I can't remember.
That's called the Heritage.
Heritage
1, because we're interested in those etchings, just like you said. It's a really cool way to show a piece of our history, but also make it kind of sexy. Honestly, Taylor, the code name for this was Project Sexy Axe at the beginning until we figured out a new name for it. But you just don't see etching anymore.
Yeah, you don't see etches, and you don't really see octagonal handles on anything production. This is a super old type of handle. Octagonal was big in the 30s, 40s, 50s. It kind of went away after that, if my timeline's correct. But this is a super cool piece, man. It's cool to see an octagonal handle.
That what's hard about the octagonal handle too is to and we're by no means perfect at it, but it's hard to balance the corners on an octagonal handle and still get the ergonomics right to where it's not like digging into you.
Hot spots.
At least for me, the octagonalness helps me index the axe head a little bit more.
It's more controllable. You know where your blade, what direction you're going by the handle.
Guys, it's not the answer for axe handles, but it's certainly something interesting to see out there. I mean, you still see it on hammers nowadays. Why not axes?
Yeah. So a lot of hammer handles still have that semi-octagonal shape to them. Mm-hmm. So you talked about the Bushcraft Global stuff. How did you get started in that? 'Cause that's a big road there. Yeah,
it's a very, very long story. But SC Knives, right? Jeff Randall runs. Jeff Randall is one of the owners of SC Knives, and once again, reading all the Tactical Knives magazine articles he used to write for Tactical Knives back in the day, and talk about all these crazy trips that he did out in the jungle. Well, I like bugs. I like herpetology and the study of snakes and all these other animals. And I like big knives. And where do you get that together? The jungle. And back in 2009, I took my first real jungle trip. I've been to like Costa Rica and El Salvador and some of these other places, but never like jumped into the jungle hardcore. And so I took his trip. And actually, that's how their first SC hungless, because actually some of their knives aren't made in the U.S. The Libertat ones are made in other places, such as El Salvador. And I was like, "Hey Jeff, if I'm able to get you some machete blade blanks, would you be interested in letting me come down on one of your trips?" And we kind of put that together. And of course, I paid for the trip too. But that's kind of how that relationship started. And I fell in love with the jungle. I could not stop going down there. And so I started picking up how often I go down there. On one trip, I was on an expedition for about 30 days near Peru, Brazil, and Colombia. And they all come together in this place called the Tri-Corners because all three countries come together. And I went out one night, saw these animals like spiders as big as my hand, cute little possums about this big, lizards all over the trees, poison dart frogs like from National Geographic. And my mouth was like open for like the entire night. Like, oh my gosh, this is incredible. And so I wake up in the morning on this eco reserve and I get out of my hammock. And this guy who sounds like Arnold Schwarzenegger comes by, smoking a cigarette. He's like, "Yeah, man, what do you do?" And I'm like, "Well, I write and design knives." And he's like, "What? Really? I love knives." And he's like, "Come over to my place." And it turns out he was the owner of the whole ecotourism area. And he showed me a bunch of knives he made before and showed me some of his survival stuff. And he's like, "Joe, I have these tribes who I'm close friends with. I'm a personal hunter with them, do all this stuff." And he's like, "I'd really like to show people some of their skills." I'm like, "Oh, I know a guy. And that's how Bushcraft Global started. And that owner of the Eco Reserve is Tanamboka, Goran Mikhailovich. Tanamboka Knives. He also has some designs with Condor and Tops. And that's kind of how I really got into that immersion of knives and jungle. And we really do like a really good job of incorporating living with your knife and still having a fun time down in the bush. It's not like a survival class. You kind of learn by what's it called, trial by fire, where you just put down into there, and then like, hey, if you have a problem with using a machete, we'll get Alberto here to show you how, and we show you all this stuff as we're doing it, and it works really well. And I tell you what, it's really changed my mindset on knives, and has really helped me with a lot of my designs, such as this one. It gives me some ideas of, okay, if I was out in the bush in Colombia, what would I do? Or if I was out in the bush of, Appalachia, I might want to have something that was more akin to chopping. I love how he gets back every single time. So, like, for instance, this Pat Golok is a little bit thicker. You could split more with that. Not saying that you don't split wood out in the jungle. You definitely do. But and this would work just as fine out in the jungle. But I like this one for backpacking in areas where you're allowed to chop wood. And that's kind of where that came from. So
that's one of my favorite Condor designs right here.
That's an old one too.
I'm a huge fan of this because it's short, doesn't take up a lot of space.
Yeah, fits in your pack.
It's a thicker blade, but it's not super heavy like you think it would be. I love mine. I put a crazy convex edge on it.
I'm sure you did.
Great,
He's pretty
great
good at
tool for just around your house. I mean,
yeah,
this is very useful for a lot of things.
The trick with this, with any knife design, is you have to balance something called a distal taper. Otherwise, you get some very, very thick blades. So this one only goes to maybe like 3 or 4 millimeters here to 2 millimeters. But that distal taper is very, very important on swords, on machetes, and on knives. It's not necessarily the rule. You can get plenty of knives out there without a distal taper, but in a lot of different designs, it can help a lot. And axes too.
Yeah. Don't think I want to have an axe in the jungle.
No, we do.
You do?
Yeah. We actually just walk out there with just one, the round poles.
Yeah.
That one that I gave you.
Yeah.
So all the time.
South American pattern.
Yeah. Honestly, that's what they call it. So the back end is round on the axe. So this is
the pole. Is round. There's no real pole on it. It's just kind of like a wrapped.
Yeah.
Almost.
And I kid you not, they have the axe handle tree where you can go cut a piece out of the root system, and the tree still lives, and it ergonomically fits perfectly on the axe head, and it's rounded already, and you can just go to town. They call it I think it's called the boat paddle and axe handle tree.
So if you guys didn't know, axes in South America are not traditional to the ones we have here.
Yeah, they're huge.
Just kind of try to imagine a 5-pound tomahawk.
Yeah, honestly, that's it.
All the weight is really in the forward area of the axe. And there's no wedge. They're just slip fit handles. So they're a little bit different.
Yeah.
They're super cool.
And they have a huge face, a huge blade on the front. Yeah, it's massive looking. And when the guys are chopping with it, they like whip their body all crazy like, and it's really it's really neat to see, and they use them all the time. So a lot of times you think, oh, okay, we're out in the jungle, some guy has a machete. Well, if they're an agriculture gentleman or woman, they might have an axe and a machete with them, and it's all filed to heck too. I mean, like, they have the Indian Mercer brand out there that doesn't have like a very good heat treat. It's like 42 or something, and they're like they're all filed down like crazy. It's really interesting.
So we've name dropped some other knife makers today.
Sure, yeah.
But you've been in the knife world for years.
Mm-hmm.
Who are some of the most influential knife makers you've met that have influenced you in your career?
Ooh, that's a really, really good question. Definitely Ethan Becker. He's not only a close friend, but just an amazing knife designer. I've been camping with him countless number of times. He's a really amazing gentleman, easy to talk to. He can cook like crazy. Of course he can cook. Ethan Becker of Becker Knives. He designs for K-Bar. His grandmother and his mother and him all have taken part in the book, The Joy of Cooking. And this is like a book that's like this thick. It's an incredible thing. A lot of y'all might have it in your kitchen, but he's an incredible knife designer and has taught me a lot about why would you design it this way and stuff too. Also LT Wright. He's an incredible designer. He has a lot more passion in simple designs that started out from way back in the day selling at knife shows and gun shows all the way to the powerhouse that he is today. I've went and taken classes underneath him, Scandi grind classes that he's put on. So he's an incredible maker. If we're going to go outside the US, I think one of the makers I'm a very, very big fan of is Jesper Voxenes, if I'm saying that right.
Yep.
He's an incredible designer, and you know it's his style as soon as you see it. Jesper, sorry if I'm butchering your name. He's really got like an eye for doing some crazy different grinds and things along that line too. And so as a designer, his stuff I've always been a big fan of, whether he's doing Giant Mouse or Boker or Lord only knows. He even worked with Helle for knife design too. Helle Knives out of Norway. So he's incredible as a designer too. Definitely influential to me because I was like, man, I want to be that good and comfortable at designing someday. It doesn't take too much to design. I started, with Condor just by drawing. And I've got pictures of the first night I was designing because my buddy Tim Stetzer, who you've met, was like, Joe, what are you doing right now? And I just had like a coffee pot in one hand and libation in the other, and a whole bunch of French curves and graph paper out, and that was how I designed like the Golok. And now I had to learn off of YouTube, how to use AutoCAD, and there are a bunch of much younger designers out there who are much better than me at using some of these programs, and that's something that I'm starting to see a lot of now, which I'm a big fan of, because a lot of these young guys have enough time, back in the day, instead of playing Minecraft, they play on AutoCAD and all these other designing softwares and are able to do stuff. So I'm kind of excited to see what the youth are coming out with too.
I tried using AutoCAD once. It's not for me.
Now it takes some patience.
Yeah, I'm no good with computers.
If you guys are interested in doing your own knife stuff, KnifePrint.com. I think it's knifeprint.com. They have some pretty easy to use software out there where you sketch up your own design and they will water jet cut it for you and send it to your house. Ooh. So it's 2D, y'all. It's 2D. So you're, working with just the flat, but it's kind of a neat way to start.
Cool. All right. Well, that's going to wrap it up for part 1 of this 2-part series. Surprise, we're gonna have 2 parts to this, so make sure you like and subscribe. Follow Joe Flowers on Instagram and Facebook if you want to go to the jungle, especially. Stay tuned for part 2, guys.